Hello everyone, my name is MiZta Zombie, and today I'm going to be bringing you guys a different kind of video from what I usually did. Today, I'm going to be talking about PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. I played this game back in late 2012 when it first released, and I played it competitively, and I loved it. As someone who grew up with PlayStation, it was a joy to see some of my favorite game characters in this battle arena style game. Now, yes, the game is not original or groundbreaking, but it had a lot going for it. I mean, an arena-style beat-em-up game featuring the biggest names in PlayStation's history. Why wouldn't that be awesome? However, despite my hype for the series, I felt like the game was lacking in some big areas. One of the most recurrent drawbacks that is often pointed out is the surprisingly small roster. Now, despite what some may say, the game didn't have a terrible roster. Sure, it was small, but it included big names like Parappa the Rapper, Kratos, Ratchet & Clank, Cole McGrath, Jak and Daxter, Sir Daniel Fortescue, Sly Cooper, Nathan Drake, Sackboy, and even Spike from the Ape Escape series. And yes, there were some questionable characters like Fat Princess, Big Daddy, Raiden, the 2013 DMC version of Dante, which... yeah, remember that? Even if you include the 4 DLC characters that were later added, the roster itself was decent, but it felt like several characters were just missing. With a game that celebrates the history of PlayStation, you'd think they would have gotten other big names like Crash, Spyro, Lara Croft, Sora, or even Cloud Strife. I mean, there wasn't even a character from the Resistance series despite there being 2 stages from that game. Now, I don't want you guys to get the wrong idea here. I was not disappointed by the original PlayStation All-Stars. Like I said, I loved it. It's just, looking back at it now, I definitely feel the game lacked in several key areas and bombed in a couple of big ones. But that's okay, because these drawbacks can be fixed in a potential sequel for the series. Since the reveal of the PlayStation 5, people around the PlayStation community have brought up the idea of a new PlayStation All-Stars game. And in today's market, with PlayStation being bigger than it's ever been, there's definitely a chance for the franchise to make a comeback. Especially since there's been a plethora of new PlayStation exclusive titles since All-Stars released in late 2012, with characters that would be perfect for a game like All-Stars. So with that said, this video will be going over what I think would be the perfect roster for a potential sequel to PlayStation All-Stars. I have looked all throughout PlayStation's history from the start of the original PlayStation to the handheld consoles and all the way to the most recent titles offered on the PlayStation 4, all to research who would be the best fits for the roster. So hopefully I won't miss any big names. Maybe. Okay, first some rules on how this list will play out. First off, I will not be using the 1 character per franchise rule that the original game sort of had. There are a ton of characters throughout the PlayStation universe that need their chance to shine. So don't think of this video as my personal dream roster for the sequel. Think of it more as a research list of who would be the best characters to beat in the next game and what each spot would bring to the table. Secondly, this is an obvious one, but I won't be including characters from games that have yet to be released as of this video's upload. I'm saying this rule because the original All-Stars included Raiden, who was from a game that was released several months after All-Stars Battle Royale did. So I will not be talking about games like Kenna Bridge of Spirits, even though Kenna looks like she could be an excellent fighter based on what little we've seen of her in her trailer. Thirdly, this is not a rule, but rather a heads up. Yes, this list will include third-party entries, but a big majority of the characters in this list are PlayStation exclusive. I'll start by going over the classic PlayStation 1 entries, then work my way up by console generations, eventually topping off the list with the third-party reps. This way we can separate the PlayStation exclusive spots with the ones that aren't. However, I'm going to allow a few exceptions since there are third-party characters that need to be in the sequel like Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon. Speaking of which, let's start off the list with an obvious contender, Crash Bandicoot. Yeah, you knew this was coming and this shouldn't be a debate. This is the guy who helped put the Sony PlayStation on the map. He needs to be in PlayStation All-Stars. For his potential moveset, he can use slide attacks, shoot things with his Wumpa Bazooka, toss TNT boxes at people, and use his signature spin attack, which can even shoot projectiles back at their attackers. Heck, his ultimate attacks could involve kicking chickens at people, summoning Aku Aku, or maybe calling in Mecha Bandicoot from Crash Twinsanity as his level 3 attack. Now, I don't think Crash should be the only character from his series entering the battle. I think there should be 2 others that join him. One of the 2 is Crash's kid sister Coco. Now, on paper, Coco may seem like a copy character of Crash, and well, yeah, that's understandable. I mean, they're both bandicoots and play practically the same in the games they're from. But I'd like to argue that Coco has way more potential in her moveset than just a simple skin swap for Crash. For starters, she's way smarter than her brother, and based on what we've seen of her throughout the Crash games, she's got some knowledge in martial arts, and is even skilled at tinkering and inventing. So maybe Coco can put those skills to use and utilize some form of support equipment to help her out in combat. She could even call in Purr to charge down her enemies as an ultimate attack. Dr. Neo Cortex is the third and final Crash character on the list. Now, unlike Coco, Cortex isn't much of a hand-to-hand combatant. Then again, as I'm making the script, they just announced a new Crash game where it looks like he's gonna learn some new moves since the last time we saw him. But taking what we know now, he's obviously got his fancy ray gun and his hoverboard. So while his combo potential might be on the weaker side, he could excel at run and gun style keep away tactics, keeping his distance from his enemies while picking them off from a distance. As for his ultimates, he could utilize his henchmen like Tiny Tiger and Pinstripe, or for his level 3 he could drink Embryo's mutation potion and become his hulked out form just like in his boss battle from Crash Mind Over Mutant. While we're on the topic of Crash, let's switch over to another must for All-Stars, Spyro the Dragon. Now Spyro could be similar to Dr. Cortex where he would have a lot of mobility in the air and could use flyby keep-away tactics by hurling fireballs at people from the skies. And could even get in close with his charge attacks, tail swipes, and claw strikes. He can even have a level 3 ultimate where he turns into Dark Spyro and does heavy damage with his ether breath. He's definitely got potential to be one of the best aerial fighters in the game. Next on the list, let's talk about Ripto. Now, my knowledge on the Spyro series is a bit lacking, but from what I know about this guy, he could use his staff to attack people with his fireballs and other various spells, and can also summon various monsters to aid him in a fight. He could also maybe use his dinosaur companions Crush and Gulp with his ultimate attacks. Next on the list is Parappa the Rapper. He was already in the first game, so I'll be quick with him. He was easily one of the best characters in the first game. Not in terms of power or win-loss ratios, but in terms of how well he fit with the All-Stars formula. He has to come to the sequel. I'm also going to throw Chop Chop Master Onion into the roster as well. Being a martial arts teacher, he could be a monster in close range combat, but would struggle against ranged and aerial fighters like Spyro. The dude could even grow huge enough to one-shot whatever this thing is, which would make for a devastating level 3 ultimate attack. Just imagine a giant Chop Chop Master Onion going up against a sized-up Zeus from God of War. From the same world as Parappa, but from a different game, we have Lammy from Jammer Lammy. With her guitar, she can launch musical note projectiles at people, shred her guitar for a close-range AoE stun, or simply use it as a melee weapon. I mean, I don't think they'll be letting her use her chainsaw guitar on people, but you never know. Also, she's a surprisingly fast runner, so she needs to be one of the quicker characters in the game. Her level 3 attack could be like Parappa the Rapper's, where instead of schooling the other characters in a rap battle, Lammy blasts her foes with the power of a crazy rock concert featuring her band Milk Can. Another old returning character, we have Spike from Ape Escape. He was perfect in the last game, and I loved how Superbot remembered this old franchise and gave Ape Escape the attention it needed. If a sequel were to happen, let's hope he can stick around. While we're at it, I'm also going to add Spike's arch enemy Spectre as well. The guy is a telepath who uses energy shields both offensively and defensively, and has access to a monkey army with different abilities at his disposal. He could be a summoner type of character who can cover a wide range of ground in a match. The next character we gotta keep from the prequel is Toro Inoue. He was adorable, and is also a pretty big character in Japan. Also, he's a cat. More than enough reason for him to come back. Another returning favorite, we have Sir Daniel Fortescue. Like Parappa, he fit incredibly well with the All-Stars formula, so let's hope he can come back for the sequel. Next up, we have Dart from The Legend of Dragoon. Believe it or not, this guy was actually supposed to be in the original PlayStation All-Stars as a DLC character, but Superbot shut down all future DLC projects after Isaac Clarke and Zeus. And because of this, we never got to see this underdog make the comeback he deserved. So if a sequel comes, let's guarantee his incredibly needed return, but not as a DLC character. For the next PlayStation 1 entry, we have Abe from the Oddworld series. He can slap people, roll around and knock people off their feet, and can even do a bit of mind control. Like maybe he can take control of one of these yellow squid guys to gun down people or blow themselves up. He could also utilize meat grinders in the meat factory he works in. I mean, Abe was supposed to be the second DLC character for the last All-Stars game, so who knows? There could be so much more this guy could do. Another PlayStation classic with a cult following, we have Tomba. This little guy would likely have one of the more animalistic fighting styles. Along with his go-to weapons such as his blackjack, mallets, or his various boomerangs, he can go full-on primal by jumping on people's backs, biting them, and then tossing them around like ragdolls, making him a fighter with great throw potential. Next up, we have Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy. Now, like Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon, Final Fantasy was a game that made a big name for itself back in its PlayStation 1 days, so it only makes sense that the head honcho of the Final Fantasy series would come to All-Stars. Now obviously he's got his Buster Sword, but Cloud can also utilize his limit techniques and various materia in his moveset. Because of the massive popularity of the Final Fantasy series, I believe other big names from the franchise should be included alongside Cloud. The first being Cloud's close friend and companion Tifa Lockhart. With her skills in martial arts, this girl would be a close-range brawler who can utilize different techniques in her moveset like her Star Shower, Focus Strike, her Dolphin Flurry Limit Break moves. I mean, her level 3 has got to be her ultimate Limit Break move, the Final Heaven. Next on the list is the main big baddie himself, Sephiroth. With his totally not compensating for anything Masume sword, coupled with his access to earth, ice, fire, and lightning materia, this dude could be a close to medium range powerhouse. Not to mention he could throw freaking meteors and supernovas at people, which would make for one heck of an ultimate attack. Next up is the Blitzball superfan himself, Tidus from Final Fantasy X. Aside from his various swords, most notably his Calibolg, his moveset could include the famous Chocobos and even utilize the overdrive gauge mechanic from the game. So if Tidus attacks enough people or tanks enough damage, he could use his overdrive ability Swordplay. Whether this ability is tailored to his ultimate meter or not, Tidus will make for a great close range fighter in All-Stars. For the last of the Final Fantasy reps, I'm adding Lightning. Lightning can be a dang capable fighter with her Blaze Blue Saber and countless physical and magical abilities like summoning her trusty mount Idilion Odin. She also has a major finishing move called the Army of One, which has to be her level 3 attack. Okay. Let's talk Twisted Metal. Now, you know we gotta bring Sweet Tooth back. He was a good all-rounder character that was easy to learn. Also, he's a PlayStation classic. But I don't think he should be the sole Twisted Metal rep. Along with Sweet Tooth, why not bring in the main guy in charge of the Twisted Metal contest? I'm of course talking about Calypso. Now, at first, Calypso may not look like the most formidable character in PlayStation's lineup. But in actuality, Calypso has some seriously terrifying power potential that a lot of people don't realize. In Twisted Metal 2012, it's stated by the character Preacher that Calypso has many powers such as time manipulation, mind reading, and even the ability to bring people back from the dead. He can even channel his inner Emperor Palpatine and fire electricity from his hands. I mean, if you think I'm bluffing, just remember that according to the lore of Twisted Metal, he stole his powers from some demon creature named Minion. He's got some serious stopping power capabilities under his belt, and if he were to make it to PlayStation All-Stars, he could possibly be one of the biggest damage dealers on the whole roster. Alright, well, I had to get to this next guy eventually. Now, most of you will think this next guy is a joke character on the roster. I mean, I don't think he's ever been talked about on any other PlayStation All-Stars sequel roster video, so I'm gonna have to explain this next spot in thorough detail. So just strap in and hear me out on this, alright? The Gran Turismo driver. Yes, I am dead serious here. I do believe that the Gran Turismo driver, or the GT driver, could be one of the more fun, unique additions. Now, Gran Turismo is one of PlayStation's biggest titles, and it absolutely needs some representation in All-Stars. It can be easily argued that it could be in the form of a stage that takes place on an in-game original track like High Speed Ring. But what about the actual driver themselves? What can this character bring to the table for the roster? Well, scraping the bottom of the idea barrel, he can use butt tons of kung fu and fight with his bare hands, or with wrenches, spray people down with emergency fire extinguishers, ride around the stage in a go-kart running people over. He could even summon a pit stop crew to assist him. Maybe one guy can lay down an oil slick that can cause people to slip on it, or another that can roll a pit stop tower which can knock characters off their feet, kinda like Nathan Drake's barrel move in the first game. Yeah, I know at first this character seems like a bizarre choice, but he could be a fun fighter to include. And if you still don't think it would be a good idea to include him, how's about we give this guy a special character skin where he would become the character Tag from Mod Nation Racers? I'll go more into special skins when we get to the PS2 section, but I think a Tag skin would be a great choice for this guy. Next, let's go over Rayman, another third-party must for All-Stars who started out on the original PlayStation. This guy's got crazy arms that can give him great throw and punching range. Couple that with his ridiculous mobility techniques like having his hair turn into a helicopter, and you got a fan-favorite character that can be one of the more agile brawlers in the game. Next up is Razel from the Legacy of Kain Soulweaver. This edgelord has access to several glyphs which can give him supernatural and elemental based attacks, like with fire, water, and sunlight. He's even got that sick looking lightning blade he's got. And when it comes to mobility, he can wall climb and also glide, meaning that he has some capability for aerial combat. Next in line, we have Gex the Gecko. This little gecko can smack people around with his tail, jump great distances, and can even wall climb, giving him some decent mobility. He's even got an assortment of bugs he can eat, which can make him spit fire, ice, electricity, and even heal himself, and also somehow surround himself with a powerful whirlwind, which could maybe be one of his ultimates. Probably the most unique character on the roster thus far, we have Robbit from the game Jumpin' Flash. A big robotic bunny who can shoot lasers, missiles, and can jump on people. I can't really see this thing being anything other than a ranged spammer style character, so while Robbit's combo potential could possibly be the worst of all the characters on the roster, his nimbleness coupled with his great health pool can more than make up for his shortcomings. For the next character, I'm going with Rudy Roughknife from the PlayStation exclusive Wild Arms. This dude's got a lot of potential moves and abilities that he could utilize from his game. Like he's got his trusty knife, his hand cannon, lots of mystic spells, various explosives. He even has his rocket skates he could use for mobility reasons. Also, keep in mind he's got access to dozens of different arms weapons he could use in his arsenal, making him a mixed range combatant. The next character is Eiji Shino from Battle Arena Toshiden. Aside from his obvious sword which can shoot fireball projectiles at people, he could use several special overdrive abilities for finishing off opponents. These overdrive abilities would make for perfect level 1 and 2 ultimate abilities, like with his Shinjiko Kumon, where he binds an opponent then hits him with a devastating 3-hit combo. He could even have a character unique ability utilizing his desperation moves, where his health reaches critical levels allowing him to pull off a one-time use special powerful attack to even out the playing field, similar to the fatal blows from Mortal Kombat 11. Next is Croc from, well, Croc. He's got these little fuzzy things called gobos which he can throw at people and can even swipe people around with his various tail attacks. He could also spawn in these little jelly trampolines for high air mobility. Now, in terms of what this little cute thing could do for his ultimate attacks, well, it's kinda tricky. I mean, maybe he could use his crystal pickups, or better yet, he could ring the Beanie Gong to summon Beanie the Bird into the arena to go ham on the other fighters. For our last PlayStation 1 entry, we have Arc Eater Rakolne from the near-forgotten Arc the Lad series. Like the other RPG characters on this list like Cloud and Rudy, Arc's got his share of special moves, weapons, and abilities he could use in All-Stars, but he mostly fights with his sword and his warrior spirit. But yeah, of all the characters on this whole list, Arc is probably the least remembered of the entire bunch. But the Arc the Lad games were a big deal series back in the PlayStation 1 days. Enough so to get a trilogy on the PlayStation 1 plus a few other games on the PlayStation 2. So why not bring this fighter back from his long retirement for possibly one more chance at the spotlight? I'd say he deserves it. And with that, we're done with the PlayStation 1 entries. That was a lot to go over, but now we're heading into the PlayStation 2 era, and we'll start with the returning duo of Jak and Daxter. They're cult classics from the PlayStation 2 era with an assortment of guns and eco they could use. They've got to make a return. But they shouldn't come alone. I'm going to include one more Jak and Daxter character, and it's someone you might not expect. Arrow, the main antagonist of Jak 3. This cyborg baddie may not have any special abilities that would put him above someone like Jak, but come on, look at him! He's a cyborg with a freaking arm cannon that can shoot explosives at people. Maybe in All-Stars they could expand on his capabilities and fighting style. I mean, his level 3 could involve that massive laser shooting tentacle thing he's got at the end of Jak 3. Next on the list is Ratchet and Clank. Now, of course these two have to be in the sequel. I mean, for God's sakes, it's Ratchet and Clank. But they won't be coming into the game alone. Alongside Ratchet and Clank, I'm also bringing in the villain of the series, Dr. Nefarious. Like the other Ratchet and Clank characters, he's got access to a crazy arsenal of weapons, has some form of super strength, decent combat experience. Oh, and he can fly. Plus, we need more bad guy characters on this list, so he would be a welcome addition. For the final Ratchet and Clank rep, I'm bringing in the famous Captain Quirk. He's famous, humorous, and has loads of physical strength. And since he's a space ranger and is on the same side as Ratchet, most of the time, he's got no shortage of crazy weapons he can use in combat. Okay, before we move on, earlier in the PlayStation 1 section, I was going to include the character Blasto, but I decided to drop him from the list. The reason being is because, well, he's basically a much less popular version of Captain Quirk, with a dash of Duke Nukem. I mean, arsenal-wise, he's got a single blaster pistol and a jetpack. And that's it. but I do think he should be included in some way. So what if the sequel included special costumes for certain characters that would make them become different characters from different games? Kind of like the special skins in Injustice 2 where Supergirl would become Power Girl or Raiden could turn into Black Lightning. This would mean more characters could come to All-Stars. So how about the idea of a special Blasto skin for Captain Quirk? Let me know in the comments below. So, we just went over Jak and Daxter along with Ratchet and Clank. Let's go over the third member of the PlayStation 2 Holy Trinity, Sly Cooper. Yes, obviously Sly's gotta stick around. With his unique ability to turn invisible coupled with his parries, he was a great fighter who specialized in playing mind games. And yes, you guessed right, he's not gonna be the sole rep on this list. I'm going to include the other members of his heist crew. First, let's go over Bentley. Being the brains of the group, Bentley could utilize various technology in his fighting style. Yes, he definitely won't be the fastest character on the roster due to him being, well, a turtle in a wheelchair, but his chair does have special gadgets that can let him fly, so he can have some aerial combat capabilities. Next up, we have the muscle of the group, Murray. Now, Murray would be a close-range melee-focused character who would utilize several of his fighting techniques like his Thunderflop body slam. His ultimate abilities could be like a crazy punch combo using his Fists of Flame ability, or one with his aboriginal ball form. So that does it for Sly's gang, but I'm not done with the Sly reps just yet. I'm also including Carmelita Fox on the list. With her excellent skills in hand-to-hand combat and acrobatics, she'd be a great fit for a game like PlayStation All-Stars. Oh, and the girl's packing some heat with her energy pistol capable of several different firing styles. All the more reason why she should be added. For the next returning character, I'm including Colonel Raddick from the Killzone games. He was the long-range focused fighter in the last game, and it wouldn't hurt to have him back. I mean, this roster needs more bad guy characters anyway. Okay, let's talk God of War. Now for the God of War franchise, I believe there should be 4 characters from the series in the All-Star sequel. Obviously, the first one is Kratos from the more recent 2018 adaptation of God of War. I mean, he's already a formidable foe with and without the Leviathan axe. He also has Atreus who can aid him from the sidelines. I mean, Atreus can shoot stun arrows, lightning arrows, and even rune summon abilities that would make for perfect ultimate attacks. I'm giving the next roster slot to Baldur. He can be a pretty quick Tonka tough brawler who can utilize his light and ice abilities. As for his complete pain immunity, well, maybe they can implement that in his moveset by making him an absolute tank. Now, of course, he would take damage health-wise and can be defeated. But in terms of the whole Baldur not feeling pain thing, well, they could give him a unique character ability where he, say, recharges a tiny portion of his health for every hit he takes. I don't know, something that can go with his pain immunity. For the next spots, we're taking a step back to the older God of War games, with the third spot going to Zeus, another returning character. Now, yes, I understand that Zeus was not the most well-received character from the last game, but remember, the whole reason Zeus got the hate he received was because he was essentially the second character on the game's roster who broke the one character per franchise rule. But remember, this list doesn't have that rule, so yeah, why not include Zeus? He was definitely one of the more powerful characters in the last game's roster despite being one of the slower entries and having very easy to avoid ultimate attacks. But he could get a new move list and ultimates, making him a bigger threat than in the last game. Now, the fourth character from the God of War franchise is an interesting one. I think the final God of War slot has to go to the original Ghost of Sparta version of Kratos. Now, to keep this Kratos from being a clone fighter of the Nordic Kratos, each of them would only have weapons and abilities from the games they're from. So on one hand, you have the Nordic mythology version of Kratos who would only use the Leviathan axe with its many heavy and light attacks, along with the rune abilities Atreus can use in combat. While on the other hand, you have the Ghost of Sparta version of Kratos who would only use the Blades of Chaos, the Heads of Helios, the Boots of Hermes, the Apollo Bow, and all the other Greek weapons in his arsenal. This way here, both characters feel different from one another. I mean, think about it, if they were to add cutscenes in an actual story mode in the PlayStation All-Star sequel, imagine seeing the Ghost of Sparta Kratos cross paths with the Nordic version of Kratos and how they'd interact with one another. Another highly requested character, Sora from Kingdom Hearts. I mean, he was one of the highest requested characters to be in the last game, you know, aside from Crash and Spyro. He would have his standard Keyblade strikes, magic attacks, and his various in-game abilities like his Blitz and Hurricane Blast. He could also have a parry since he does have a counterattack move in his games. Now, whether or not we'll actually see Sora in PlayStation All-Stars is questionable, considering his affiliation with the Disney brand. So I doubt we'll be seeing Goofy and Donald Duck assisting Sora in his fights. But if the potential sequel devs do the near impossible and get him in, expect a lot of Sora mains. Another returning character from the old roster, we got Dante from Devil May Cry. Not the 2013 DMC version of Dante, the real deal Dante that everyone knows and loves. Yeah, that one. Dude's got a boatload of weapons in his arsenal, most notably Ebony and Ivory, his Rebellion sword, and with the new game they could expand his arsenal by giving him his Lucifer backpack or his motorcycle from the most recent game. It would be great to see him again, but like I said earlier, please not the 2013 Dante again. Let's also add in his older brother Virgil. He's got his primary weapon Yamato, his Beowulf gauntlets for getting some combo punches in, and he can summon these spectral blades around him like a Beyblade. And for his ultimate, he could even summon these blades and have them rain down on the stage. And like Dante, the dude's got his own devil trigger formation. For our next two spots, we got Kazuma Kiryu and Goro Majima from the Yakuza series. Both of these characters would make for great close-range combo-heavy fighters who could have the ability to switch their fighting styles mid-match. So Kiryu can switch between his various styles like his brawler Russian beast styles, while Goro has his slugger, thug, and breakdance styles. Also, yes, they could use guns as well, but it is rare for both of these guys to resort to firearms for taking people down. And if you think that's not the case with the game Yakuza Dead Souls, well, that game is not canon to the series. So I think it's best for neither of these guys to use guns, just their fists and whatever blunt or sharp melee weapons they got. For both of their level 3s, they could unlock their legendary fighting styles, granting them much more powerful attacks. Now, unlike the level 3s in the game, once Kiryu and Majima get their level 3s, they should keep the fighting style until they get KO'd. And until that happens, their ultimate meter would just top off at level 2, until they respawn again. I'm giving the next spot to the character Wanderer from the Shadow of the Colossus series. This is a guy that can take down giant monsters the size of skyscrapers with nothing but his sword and a bow. That alone should cement him a spot on the roster. I mean, he won't be fighting building-sized chop master onions, but either way, he'd be a welcome addition. From the same dev studio as Wanderer, we have Iko from the game of the same name. This kid can use several melee weapons with his kit, most notably his sword, stick, whatever, and can summon his companion Yorda to aid him by either blinding people or having Iko toss her at other fighters. He could even utilize the shadow creatures he fights against to help him in some way. I mean, if Spike can use the evil monkeys he fights against in his moveset, surely this kid can use the shadows he fights against. From the criminally underrated game The Mark of Kree, I'm adding in the Samoan bulldozer Rao Utu. He's got a weapon for practically every combat situation. He's got a bow, a sword, a bow staff for smacking around multiple enemies at once, and he's got a pet bird companion named Kuzo who he can use in his moveset to mess with people. Maybe Kuzo can pick the snot out of the other characters, distracting them long enough for Rao to get a few cheap shots in. Alright, that does it for the PlayStation 2 reps. It's time to move on to the PlayStation 3 era, and we'll start with one of the biggest series of the PlayStation 3, Uncharted. Now, without question, Nathan Drake has got to be in the game again. He's one of the most well-known characters in PlayStation's lineup. His moveset would have the usual guns, grenades, deployable cover, punches, all the same stuff he previously had. But maybe not the barrel. Instead, he could utilize his grappling hook from the 4th game to swing around stages and get the drop on people. Maybe he can throw the hook at people as a weapon and can rope it back. Going back to what I said earlier about the special skins, Nathan Drake has to get several skins where he become other characters from the Uncharted series. One of them definitely has to be Chloe Fraser, since she did eventually get her own spin-off game at one point. There's also Nathan's brother Sam Drake and maybe even Victor Sullivan. Also, just for the hell of it, why not include the Donut Drake skin as well? I mean, come on, that's too funny to not be included. Our next returning entry is Sackboy from Little Big Planet. Yes, his moveset and fighting style was one of the more stranger ones and required a good bit of practice to master. But his moveset could get an overhaul in the next game to make him easier to get into. Also, come on, it's Sackboy, you gotta put him in. And going back to earlier with the special skins, there is the possibility of a Newton skin. You know, the villain from Little Big Planet 3. Alright, time to talk about Infamous. Most notably the 4 entries representing the series. Let's talk about the first two, Good Cole McGrath and Evil Cole McGrath. Yes, I know. People were a little weirded out by Evil Cole's spot in the last game, but there was a reason for this. So take this next bit with a grain of salt, but I dug around and found some possible notes on the game that originally in PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, Cole McGrath was supposed to be the only Infamous character in the game. but he would have a character unique karma meter which would move to either the good side or the evil side based on how you played as Cole. But someone somewhere decided that no, both variations of Cole McGrath must be in the game no matter what. I mean, I don't know how they would have made the good evil karma feature work. Maybe the good version of Cole would just fight clean while the evil version would use items and fight dirty. Who knows? Now, I don't know if I'm going to be in the minority here or not, but yes, like I said earlier, both good and evil Cole should stick around as separate characters. Sure, evil Cole could be a special skin, but both variations have different moves and abilities going for them, despite sharing 40% of the same pie. I mean, evil Cole's got his oil and fire abilities with a more AoE focused attack style. Plus, he can drain the health and ultimate meter of his foes and add it to his own, giving him some extra survivability. On the other hand, the good version of Cole has ice to immobilize his enemies and could do more damage than his evil counterpart. Next in the Infamous category, we got Delsin Rowe. Now, I played Infamous Second Son pretty recently and oh boy, this dude's got some serious roster potential. To make him different from the next Infamous spot on this list, spoiler alert, it's Fetch. Delsin should mainly stick to his smoke and video powers. I mean, he could throw smoke bombs, smack people with his chain, turn invisible, summon video angels to attack an area as an ultimate ability. I mean, this dude has so much variety in what he could do. I mean, one of his ultimates has to be his orbital bomb attack, where he blasts himself high into the air and then flies back down like a missile, taking out anyone below. Alright, let's talk about Fetch. Now, as I mentioned before, Delsin should only stick with his smoke and video powers and avoid any of his neon abilities. That way there, he won't feel like a copy character of Fetch. Now, Fetch herself would be a force to be reckoned with in All-Stars. With her neon powers which grant her the ability to run up buildings like the Flash himself, Fetch could easily be one of the fastest characters on the entire roster, zipping across stages, running up walls, sniping people with her neon blasts, tossing homing rockets at people. I mean, her level 3 attack without a doubt has to be her neon singularity. Now, yes, Fetch is a pretty powerful character, but the catch to her moveset is precision. Fetch may be a very speedy girl, but if you can't hit your marks with your neon powers, you're gonna struggle. So, I'm definitely gonna be in the minority on this next one. Fat Princess. Yup, she's gotta be in the next game. Love her or hate her, she was one of the original 6 starting characters back in the last game, and she did have a decent moveset. In the sequel, it's likely she'll have the same close to medium range style gameplay she previously had, and could be one of the higher health characters. Why? Because reasons. Another returning spot, we have Noriko from Heavenly Sword. She was super fun to play as. Kinda like a younger Kratos, but with the ability to swing people around like a merry-go-round. She needs to stay in the sequel. The last of the returning PS3 era characters, let's talk about the DLC character Emmett Graves from Starhawk. I'm gonna throw in some personal bias here, but this guy was my main back in PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. I absolutely loved his moveset and how you can just switch your kit between shotguns, rocket launchers, and assault rifles, and how you can just call down turrets Titanfall style. Definitely a very defense-focused character with one of the coolest level 3 ultimate abilities in the whole game. Now we're moving on to the newcomers of the PlayStation 3 era, and we'll start with probably the freakiest, most unique entry on this list. The next character is from the early PS3 series Resistance, a game that has had a bunch of references in the first PlayStation All-Stars with 2 stages, a pickup weapon, and even those weird cheerleader minions, and yet no one from Resistance made it to the game's roster. I mean, at a quick glance, it's not hard to see why. They would need someone that would have a genuine fighting game moveset with ultimate abilities, taunts, and all. So who could they put in the game that can check all these boxes? The main character guy whose name I don't remember? No. Resistance was not remembered for this generic World War II soldier guy. It was looked back on best for the scary as hell alien bad guys you fought against throughout the whole series. So the Resistance rep needs to be one of the Chimera aliens you fight against. So I researched all the Chimera aliens throughout the entire franchise to see who would best fit in All-Stars. And I think I found one character that could work perfectly. Daedalus. Yep, I'm sure most of you watching have never played Resistance and likely have no idea who or what this thing is. So, let me explain. So, the Daedalus is the main antagonist and final boss in the second Resistance game. He used to be this soldier guy named Jordan Shepard, but after some crazy as hell plot development that I don't have the time to get into, was mutated and transformed into a unique variation of a Chimera Angel, which are these telepathic floating aliens that sit at the very top of the Chimera hierarchy. So, what's so special about this Daedalus guy, you may ask? Well, aside from his razor-sharp tentacles and his levitation ability, he has telepathic mind control over other chimeras. Now, I'm just gonna get this out of the way right now. Yes, this character would be the Pokemon trainer of the PlayStation All-Stars universe. Only instead of controlling cute little animals that shoot water from their mouths, this thing can control nightmare-fueled aliens that want to kill you, infect you with an alien mutation virus, or both. Nice. Now, in terms of this thing's moveset, first thing to note is that the Daedalus itself would not fight. Instead, he would float on the outside of the stage observing the fight as it goes on, and he would summon at least 3 different Chimera soldiers to fight on his behalf. Most likely it would be the Hybrid, the Ravager, and the Hardfangs, each with different weapons and pros and cons over the others. For his ultimate abilities, he could call in a swarm of leapers to swarm the other combatants, use his levitation ability to toss debris at people, or he can call in a giant mega-sized boss chimera like a Widowmaker, a Titan, or even a Brawler. The Daedalus could even use his own mental abilities to essentially stun or slow the other fighters, possibly as a level 1 ult ability. Definitely an oddball character, but I truly think this freak of alien nature is the best character to represent the Resistance series. Up next, let's go over Jodie Holmes from Beyond Two Souls. Because she was trained to be a CIA operative, this girl knows her stuff when it comes to combat. She has experience with guns, knives, and can even throw down against multiple people at once. However, the thing that would make her stand out on the roster would be her stand ability. Oh, no, wait, I'm sorry, I meant her ghost companion, Aiden. Now, a unique feature that I think would be genius for Jodie's moveset is that Aiden himself would not be controlled by Jodie, and would instead very slowly passively chase down other players in the stage, and if he manages to catch up to one of them, he could shove them back, stun them, or cause some form of damage. Imagine that Jodie is fighting on a stage against a Colonel Raddick player who's spamming his sniper rifle move again and again in the corner. Now, Jodie herself would be in trouble, but Aiden would just slowly creep up to Colonel Raddick and would just smack him off his feet, allowing Jodie to move up on him. Essentially, she can punish players who stay in one place for too long. As for her ultimate abilities, her level 3 could be where she's taken to the facility at the end of Beyond Two Souls where everything goes haywire and ghosts start attacking the other players. While we're discussing Quantum Dreams games, let's talk about Ethan Mars from Heavy Rain. Now, I understand that there's a lot of people out there that would love to see Ethan Mars throw down against other PlayStation bigwigs like Kratos and Ratchet and Clank. But this is my list here, and personally, I'm gonna have to put Ethan Mars off this list. Yes, I understand Ethan Mars was decently requested to be in the last game, but I think it's for the best that he doesn't show up. Unlike the others discussed in the list so far, Ethan doesn't possess any special talents or skills that could cement him a spot in the game. Sure, he's from a very popular PlayStation 3 game, but that's not gonna save him in a fight against someone like Dante. What can he do moveset wise? Honestly, not much. Unlike others on the list, he's not a human that slays gods with mythical blades, he doesn't have any supernatural powers, he's not well trained to use firearms, he barely has any hand-to-hand combat experience, he's not from an unrealistic wacky universe, and he's not a mysterious figure who seems generic at first but could kick your ass in 5 different ways at the drop of a hat. He's just a generic everyday guy with nothing special going for him, other than a possible special skin for a character on the list. Alright, here we go. The Last of Us. Yup. So before we go into this spot, I understand that the most recent game in the series was not the most well received amongst the fans. Not all the fans, but a good number of them. Despite the questionable sequel, we shouldn't forget how legendary and groundbreaking the first Last of Us was. So for this spot, I'm adding in the 2-in-1 character of Joel and Ellie. Maybe it could just be Joel himself and have Ellie be a special skin for Joel, but if there's a new PlayStation All-Stars game on the horizon, it would be ridiculous to not include either of these two. Moveset wise, imagine a much less agile, more defense focused version of Nathan Drake who can hit harder but has a limited moveset. Maybe Joel can be on the front lines of the fight while Ellie sits on the sidelines and crafts items for Joel to use mid-fight. So if Joel needs a smoke bomb, an upgraded melee weapon, or a shrapnel mine, Ellie can just make one and toss it to Joel. They could definitely utilize the cordyceps spores and even a special smoke bomb which has a special mechanic where if any projectiles pass through the smoke, there's a high chance that the attack will not harm Joel. So it's not a perfect defense, but it's at least some defense. For their ultimate abilities, they gotta utilize the infected. Like, maybe you can control a bloater and throw spores all over the arena, which would do periodic damage to the other players who enter the spore clouds, temporarily locking down certain areas of the stage to other players. For our next entry, let's go over Kotaro from the game Puppeteer. He's a little puppet dude with a big old golden pair of scissors that he can use to snip at people. Plus, he's got several different heads he can switch between at will, each of them granting various abilities he can use in combat. Like the wrestler's head, for example, which grants him powerful body slams. He's also got the knight head for blocking attacks, the ninja head for tossing bombs at people, and he's got a pirate head for grabbing and yanking people towards him scorpion style. Or he can use it for grappling onto edges or mobility reasons. From a surprise appearance in Smash Bros. To my roster list for an All-Star sequel, we have Joker from the Persona series. You may be wondering how Joker in All-Stars could be different from his appearance in Smash. Well, aside from his standard guns and combat knives, he could use multiple personas in his moveset thanks to his wildcard ability. So instead of relying on just Arsena, he can also summon various other personas like Sentinel and Raoul, giving Joker multiple layers of strategy to his combat. I mean, Sentinel has to be Joker's level 3 since in the last battle in the 5th game, he's freaking huge. Okay, we're at the second to last PS3 era entry. I'm giving the spot to the Slayer of Demons. No, not that Slayer of Demons. We'll talk about him later. I was referring to the Slayer of Demons from Demon Souls. Like the Wanderer, this dude's got the cojones to take on building-sized enemies and demonic monstrosities, all with a great plethora of melee weapons ranging from axes, maces, hammers, swords, crossbows, daggers, claws, and this crazy huge sword called the Dragon Bone Smasher, which if I were a betting man would say is even bigger than Cloud's Buster Sword. And that's just the half of it. He's also got talismans and catalysts for casting various spells and magic attacks. All the more reason why the Slayer's inclusion would fit in All-Stars. And with that, we're at the last PlayStation 3 rep, and just a heads up, she's a doozy. I mean, she wasn't my first character pick from the series she's from, but she is the most popular character from her game, so we're gonna talk about her. The final PlayStation 3 era character is the Sorceress from Dragon's Crown. Sweet Jesus. Now, if an All-Star sequel actually were to happen and a Dragon's Crown rep comes to the game, there is the possibility the rep won't even be the Sorceress. It could be the elf, the fighter, or even the dwarf. But for this spot, we're gonna focus on the most popular character in Dragon's Crown, who, yes, is the Sorceress. Okay, so let's get the burning question out right here. How would the Sorceress fight in All-Stars and what could she bring to the table? Well, she can throw fireballs at people, summon tornadoes, lightning strikes, ice storms, raise skeletons from the dead to fight for her, and you wouldn't know it by looking at her, but she's surprisingly agile, able to dash and slide with decent speed. Her ultimate abilities could involve channeling her dark magic spells and turning the other fighters into frogs. Honestly, she could be a decent medium-range glass cannon type of character who's unmatched at crowd control attacks. But like I said, she'd be a glass cannon fighter, and would likely struggle against rushdown characters like Sir Daniel Fortescue and Nathan Drake. In Dragon's Crown, she does have a very high tolerance to magic attacks, so she could have a unique passive ability where she takes 50% less damage from enemy ultimate attacks. Alright, PlayStation 4 time, baby, the current gen console. Let's jump into it with the first character of the bunch, Knack. Knack. Now, this guy can grow up to the size of a building all thanks to the relic bits he absorbs into his body, but for All-Stars, he should max out at his 7-foot tall form for fighting. This way here, he can be a formidable threat, but not one that towers over the rest of the roster. However, he could grow into his huge size for one of his ultimate attacks. Maybe. Knack mostly fights at close range, relying on various kicks, punches, and body slams for his scraps. But he does have a few other tricks up his sleeve. For example, he can toss boomerangs at his foes for a ranged stun attack, blast people from afar with his own relic bits, which automatically recall to him after a few seconds. He can parry and reflect projectiles back at his attackers, can briefly hover in the air, surround himself with relic bits for his vortex maneuver, and even extend his arms over several feet with his hookshot ability, which grabs people from afar and then yanks them towards Knack, mostly for a punch combo. Knack could also have a unique mechanic where he gets smaller and weaker the more damage he takes, since in his game he can get bits of himself blasted off and then gets smaller as a result. Now, I'll be turning my attention to the game Until Dawn. You might think this game's rep would be the Psycho Killer or, Josh as he's revealed, but no. He would seem like the right choice at first with his canister of knockout gas he could flail around and his various traps and torture devices that are almost on Jigsaw's level. But there's already an even more iconic mass serial killer Psycho on this list who's way more terrifying than Josh could ever be. So, sorry Psycho, but you're not coming on this list. Instead, I'm giving the Until Dawn roster spot to the real baddies of the game, the Wendigo. This insane cursed monstrosity could be a crazy fast animalistic fighter whose speed and reflexes are up there with some of the fastest on the list thus far. However, these things would likely require a high skill level to master since these things like to dart all over the walls and such. To keep accurate to the game's lore and, to balance this thing, the Wendigo should be the only character on the entire roster with a negative character trait. The trait being where this thing would take extra damage from all fire-related attacks. So anyone with Molotov cocktails, flamethrowers, or other spells that cast fire would do extra damage to the Wendigo. Would this encourage people to spam the same move again and again? Possibly, but it would play off to the Wendigo's fire vulnerability, so I'd be down for it. Up next, we have the much-loved Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn, easily one of the best series on the PlayStation 4 right now. In terms of her style of play, she would likely be a medium-range fighter with a very defense-focused kit. She could use the various heavy weapons she rips off the heavy machine monsters, plus her standard bow, spear, and various robotic animals she can summon at will, but the real bread and butter would come with her defensive kit. She can use various traps for slowing and immobilizing her foes, like the trip caster for setting up explosive tripwires, the rope caster for immobilizing enemies, and even her blast sling which can launch proximity bombs. All this would make Aloy excel at locking down areas of the stage and keeping the fight where she wants it to be. And just like that, we're back to Quantum Dreams games again. Well, I'm sure you all know who's going to be taking this next spot. Connor from Detroit Become Human. He's a damn good hand-to-hand combatant, he can use guns, and has fast enough reflexes to dodge bullets. I mean, he is an advanced futuristic android after all. But if you're looking for something unique he could bring to the table, he could have an ability where he can scan his targets to find a weak spot. This could give Connor a chance to stun or slow a target for several seconds if he can hit him, or he could receive a temporary damage boost. He could also summon his partner Hank to aid him for several of his moves. As for his level 3, it's gotta be where Connor takes the other fighters to the garden that's in Connor's hardware or wherever this place is, and the crazy blizzard storm at the end of the game blasts through the garden, slowing down all the fighters and making them unable to fight as they're hugging themselves to stay warm. Connor would be immune to this because reasons, and could utilize the opportunity to get some free shots in. Next, let's bring in Astrobot, the PlayStation VR mascot. He may be a little fun-loving robot dude, but with a special PlayStation controller and his robot friends at his side, he can be one capable fighter. He can slap people around, jump high with his rocket shoes, glide great distances, and can use a special PlayStation controller gadget which can launch ninja stars, shoot water, blind people with a flashlight, fire bubble projectiles, and toss out a grappling hook. And for more unconventional means, he could channel his inner Cyclops and shoot lasers from his personal VR headset, and could call in other Astro robots to back him up in a fight. The next character on the list is the Hunter from Bloodborne. He's got his standard trusty cutter in his blunderbuss, but that's not all he's got. He can use various other tools and weapons like torches, shields, molotovs, cursed brews which can be thrown at an enemy giving them a random stat debuff. He could even equip Gatling guns and flamethrowers, which, yeah, had no idea those were in the game. The Hunter's also got a decent assortment of unconventional tools he could use for ultimate abilities, like blowing the Majima whistle which calls in a giant snake from the ground to chomp anyone at ground level, the Executioner glove for summoning spirits to attack people, the Call Beyond sends about a dozen light projectiles at people, and the Hunter could become this cauliflower-headed monster with deadly tentacle arms thanks to the Cos Parasite. This next spot is a bit of a stretch, but I'm gonna give it to Deacon from Days Gone. Like Colonel Raddick, this guy's moveset would focus on medium to long range combat and would comprise of guns, and yeah, mostly guns. along with more unconventional special weapons like the explosive tip crossbows and even a stun gun, which yes, can stun people and can make them spontaneously combust. He's also got various melee weapons, grenades, improvised traps, and could even use his own motorcycle in his moveset. He could also take a page out of Nathan Drake's old playbook and kick explosive barrels at people which would explode if he shoots them. And unlike in Drake's moveset, this barrel move would work for Deacon, seeing as how he utilizes explosive gas tanks for dealing with large hordes of freakers. Before we move on, I should note that Deacon's gotta get his own special character skin where he become the PS1 era character Gabriel Logan from the Siphon Filter series, which was the series Ben Studios made long before Days Gone. Of course, Gabriel wouldn't use any zombies in his moveset and would likely be riding around the stage in a more high-end performance bike compared to Deacon's. Up next, let's talk about Norman Reedus, Sam Porter Bridges from Death Stranding. His level 3 has to involve the BTs you fight against, where the other characters get pulled into this black muck and get dragged around only to flee for their lives against a player-controlled BT creature who goes ham on the other fighters. As for his moveset and what Sam could do in a fight, Sam could use those electric stun javelins the mules use for close-range pokes and can throw them at people, zapping anyone who's close to where it lands. He's also got his bola gun and sticky gun for slowing down and immobilizing enemies. He can smack people with cargo boxes and even has several different grenades he can use, like his EX grenade, which is a capsule that's full of Sam's own pee, poop, and bathwater. Gross. So if you ever wanted to throw excrement at people, well, Sam Bridges would be your guy. Also, why not give him a skin to make him look like Higgs Monaghan? If you don't know, he's the terrorist guy in the game with the golden skull mask. Next is the freshest face on the list. It's the Ghost of Tsushima himself, Jin Sakai. Like our earlier Yakuza reps Kiryu and Majima, Jin could have a way of switching his style of play before the fight starts and as it's raging on. So when you're about to start a match or respawn after getting KO'd, you're presented with a timed window on whether you like to fight as a samurai or a ghost. So there's no good Cole, evil Cole hoo-ha here. It's just one character with two styles of play. Now both the samurai and ghost styles have various advantages and disadvantages over the other. The samurai build would grant Jin armor for a higher health pool, faster melee strikes, and the ability to parry melee attacks and deflect projectiles back at their attackers. The ninja style, however, grants Jin smoke bombs, a blow dart, kunes, and his black powder bombs. He also gets a decent mobility boost over the samurai. Also, just an idea, Jin should also get a character skin where he'd become the character William Adams from the Neo series, seeing as how they're both samurai type characters with similar weapons and equipment. Probably the least recognized character in the PS4 group, we have Avalon Darrow from the PS4 exclusive Matterfall. This chick is a pure rushdown character through and through. She can run and gun with various ranged weapons from railguns, shotguns, heat-seeking energy blasts, grenades, and her standard auto-fire cannon. She can dash into enemies, knocking them back, surround herself with energy shields, create platforms giving her extra space to run and fight. Oh, and she can fly and shoot at the same time. All this would make Avalon a very mobile character who's unmatched at run and gun tactics. Now we're moving on to the portable characters. These are characters from franchises that started out on the PlayStation Portable and the PlayStation Vita. And just a heads up, this is a very small group compared to the rest of the console generations. Okay, so let's start off with the first game series here, Patapon. For the Patapon franchise, there should be two characters from this title in All-Stars. First up, we have the Patapon Tribe. While these little guys certainly won't be nimble fighters on the roster, this fighting squad could have the most versatile moveset of any character in the entire game. With access to sword fighters, archers, spear throwers, big tanky dudes, bird flyers that throw spears, magic supporters, and even these guys that shoot magic words at people with their musical instruments, the Patapon tribe could have a very diverse fighting style capable of handling whatever threat they go up against. And depending on how they handle character customization in the possible sequel, you can customize how the tribe will be. Do you want a tribe consistent of nothing but archers and spear throwers for a long-range focused group? Go for it. You want a group of big buffy tank dudes, sword guys, and bird characters for sky control? No problem. The Patapon tribe's got you covered. The second Patapon character on this list is the Uber Hero Patapon. Now, in Patapon 3, the game where the Uber Heroes are introduced, each Uber Hero has their own weapons and style of combat based on which mask they use. So this guy could either be a unique Patapon character who can switch masks and weapons mid-fight, or it can be a fighter who can tag in other Uber Heroes with different weapons to switch up your strategy. As for this thing's ultimates, there are uber heroes with crazy weapons that can be summoned and used for this purpose. You have this guy who rides a horse and can easily charge down other opponents. You have this guy who uses a sword that's twice as big as his own body. You have this guy who rides in a chariot. And then you got this guy with an artillery style gun that's bigger than most of the other guns shown off so far. The next spot is going to the last return in PlayStation exclusive character, Cat from Gravity Rush. I loved this character. Even though she was a DLC entry, she was a major breath of fresh air for the prequels roster, and was one of the best fighters in the last game. It would be great to see her return once again. I'm also including Cat's sister from another mother, Raven. In the game, her preferred method of attack comes from both her gravity manipulation abilities and her signature Blue Jay technique, which allows her to throw energy projectiles at her enemies. She's powerful enough to easily crush people with her gravity powers alone, making for devastating ultimate abilities, and can even use her Phoenix mode power up, which cranks up her stopping power. If both of these girls end up in the roster for the future sequel, there's no doubt in my mind that these two would be fan favorites. Next on the list from the Tearaway series, we've got a toy. For combat, this little girl can do anything a piece of paper can, and much more. She can toss paper balls at people, lay down glue traps to slow or immobilize enemies, turn into a paper ball and bowl through characters, knocking them down like pins, and if you want to mix up the meta, maybe have her transform into origami and attack people with the raw power of paper cuts. She could even have a hilarious ultimate ability where she calls in a giant human finger just like in the game to rampage through the arena and even poke the snot out of your enemies. Also, she's gotta have an alternative skin where you can play as Iota, the male counterpart to a toy. Okay, this is the last PlayStation exclusive character on the list. I'm giving the final spot to Tiger Shark from the PlayStation Portable series Invisimals. This creature would be one of the big heavy hitter bulldozer style characters in the game. So if you're the kind of player who plays as the big powerful guys in fighting games who get up in people's faces and does truckloads of damage, Tiger Shark would be your go-to. And that rounds out the PlayStation exclusive characters. Well, mostly PlayStation exclusive. Now, we've gone over 84 roster spots for the sequel. 84! That is way more than enough for a standard fighting game. I mean, most modern day fighting games have half as many entries as this list right now, especially when you factor in balancing, season passes, and other factors. Now, do I personally think that every character on the list so far is going to be in the game day one? No. Honestly, I can see about maybe a dozen of these guys being DLC characters and another dozen just not showing up at all. But honestly, who knows what the roster would be? It's anyone's guess. I mean, if I completely ignored all the current third-party inclusions so far, the number of reps would be at about 68. That's still a pretty hefty number, but to some, they want a tad bit more. They want the motherload. Alright, so let's go over the third-party list. Now, unlike the earlier third-party spots, most of these guys aren't really must-haves, but it wouldn't hurt to see these guys included. Now, this was probably the hardest group on the list so far to put together. I mean, if we learned anything from the last game with Isaac Clarke and Big Daddy's inclusion, there's a paper-thin limit as to who can show up in this series, meaning that any third-party character from any third-party game could be added, even if they're from a series that didn't start off as a PlayStation exclusive. But for this section, I'm only going to focus on third-party spots that would be the best fits for the game. So there's definitely going to be a character or two I won't discuss here that you like. But just remember that this is my personal list, okay? So, let's start off by going over the titles that were featured in the last game. I'm going to start with the BioShock games. What I'm about to say might upset some of you, but I don't think there should be any reps from the series in the sequel. In other words, Big Daddy is the only character from the last game that I don't think should return. Don't get me wrong, he was a pretty cool character, being this big wrecking ball of a fighter who could easily get in people's business and ground and pound them into submission, but his inclusion just didn't feel right, you know what I'm saying? Honestly, if Xbox someday decides to make their own side-scrolling brawler game with their own IPs, I think Big Daddy would fit better on the Xbox side than the PlayStation side. I know there's gonna be a bunch of you who's gonna disagree with me on that, but honestly, that's how I generally feel about the big guy. Alright, let's move on to a series with reps that should be in the game. Now, Tekken has a lot of awesome characters that could be welcome additions like Paul, Nina, King, Yoshimitsu, Eddie, Lars, and many, many more. But for this list, I'm going to limit the number of Tekken reps to just 3 spots. The story behind Tekken revolves around the Iron Fist tournament and all the family drama surrounding the Mishima family. So I think Heihachi has to stay in PlayStation All-Stars. He was a powerful character, fun to use, and had one of the best level 3 ultimates in the entire game, strapping everyone to a giant rocket and blasting them into space while he laughs like a madman as it's happening. Just genius. As for the other 2 fighters, I'm going to include the other main members of the Mishima family, Jin Kazuma and Kazuya Mishima. Both of these guys were trained in the Mishima fighting style, with Jin later developing his own take on the style, so he could have a different variation of moves compared to Kazuya. They also have their own devil formations that could easily be their level 3 ultimate abilities, and like with the Yakuza reps from earlier, these formations could be a passive level 3 until they're KO'd. Let's move on to the Metal Gear Solid series, with the first spot going to Big Boss. Why Big Boss and not Solid Snake, you may ask? Well, mainly because Big Boss was the main guy in the last great Metal Gear game, and has had a prevalent appearance throughout the Metal Gear series. He's definitely no pushover. Also, Snake is one of Big Boss's clones, so in a way they're one and the same. So who knows, if Konami allows it, Snake could be a special skin for Big Boss. I mean, why not? Big Boss would have the standard Solid Snake style kit with various espionage focused weapons like his inherited Patriot rifle, his combat knife, C4 explosives, a Fulton harness, landmines, a UA drone fitted with a machine gun for extra support, his biotic arm which can be fired like a guided missile, a tranquilizer gun which can slow down an enemy's movement speed, and of course, he's got to use the cardboard box in some way. There's one more rep I'm keeping from the Metal Gear world, Raiden. He may have been an odd choice to most in the first game, but that was before we knew this guy could suplex Metal Gears like pushovers and go toe to toe with US senators jacked up on nanomachines. You can't get more epic than that. Also, why not give Raiden an alternative skin where he can be Jetstream Sam or even Grey Fox? Both characters would fit well with Raiden's style of play. The final returning character is Isaac Clarke from Dead Space. The guy's a horror game icon, and despite starring in no games with PlayStation exclusivity, somehow he fits surprisingly alright in the last game, and I especially loved the science versus religion rivalry he had with his DLC buddy Zeus. But just like what Cat Dicker said in his PlayStation All-Stars roster video, this guy should never have been a DLC character. Right now, there's a crazy demand for a brand new Dead Space game, and I believe people would lose their freaking minds if Isaac Clarke was brought back to All-Stars again. Alright, from this point on, it's nothing but new third-party IPs. Do you guys remember when the character Terry Bogard was unveiled for Super Smash Bros? Well, during Terry's Direct, there was a part where Sakurai was talking about all the King of Fighters cameos who would be rooting for Terry Bogard on the sidelines. And then, he said this oh-so-memorable line.
By the way, you may have noticed that a very important character from the Fatal Fury series was not included. Yes, Mai Shiranui. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is for good boys and girls of many different ages, so we decided not to feature her. Please forgive us.
Yep, you probably know where I'm going with this. If Mai Shiranui can't come to Super Smash Bros., let's put her in PlayStation All-Stars, and it's not a bad idea either. She's already a fighting game character and a nimble one at that, so she can do various combos with her signature ones focusing on plowing through her enemies and slamming them into the ground with her leg grabs and fake outs. She can toss a butt ton of fans Kitana style for ranged attacks, and can use fire and explosions in her moveset. Yeah, poor girl couldn't come to Smash because she's not meant for good boys and girls. But come on, with her popularity we can't just leave her on the sidelines. She'd be a fantastic addition to the All-Stars roster. Let's just hope PlayStation will accept Mai with open arms. Aside from Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon, another game series that needed to be in PlayStation All-Stars was Resident Evil. I mean, it was a pretty big deal title back in the early PlayStation 1 days. If we get some Resident Evil characters in the sequel, I think it would be best if 3 reps were to show up. Let's talk about the first one, Albert Wesker. His speed, reflexes, and crazy good strength alone would make Wesker a fan favorite on the roster. I mean, he'd easily be in the top 10 when it comes to speed, and his hand-to-hand combat skills will put him on par with close-range powerhouses like Heihachi. Honestly, if this guy had any drawbacks or weaknesses that could be exploited by other players, I can't really think of one off the top of my head. Maybe he would struggle against crowd control characters who can lock down certain parts of the map like Aloy, but that's just an assumption. As for what his ultimate abilities could be, well, his level 3 could be where he takes a heavy dose of the Ouroboros virus and becomes his monstrosity form with tentacle tendrils and all. Next on the Resident Evil list, we have the Nemesis. with an arsenal consistent of a rocket launcher, flamethrower, minigun, and his newly added ability of using his tentacles to somehow control other people to do his bidding. This thing could be a juggernaut that specializes in keeping pressure on the other characters. Sure, he's not much of a speedster, but that hardly matters when you got heavy weaponry that can put down multiple people at once. Being a BOW or, a goddamn mutant, this thing can mutate into other terrifying forms. For instance, you could have this one form where he loses his weapons but grows a tendril arm meant for slamming the crap out of other people. Another form where he becomes this giant monstrosity that's the size of a semi-truck. And then there's this slug-like thing which can practically take out anything he goes up against. Freaky. Jill Valentine is going to be my third and final Resident Evil spot. Yeah, this spot was kind of a tricky one. I mean, if you had to choose one Resident Evil protagonist to represent PlayStation All-Stars, who would you pick between Leon Kennedy, Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, Ada Wong, or any other Resident Evil main character? Well, yeah, for me personally, I gotta go with Jill. I mean, she could kick some serious ass at close range with her excellent martial arts skills, and her various weapons like her handguns, shotguns, and her quad-barrel rocket launcher. And if she needs a bit more variety, she could recycle some of her old moves from her Marvel vs. Capcom 2 days, like where she summons zombies, infected dogs, and crows to assist her. The next horror game pick has to go to the famous and freaky as hell Pyramid Head from the Silent Hills franchise. Possibly one of the scariest baddies to come out of the PlayStation 2 era. This freak show might be one of the more slower characters on the roster, but would more than make up for it with his crazy high damage, high health, and great melee range. And being a character comprised of pure nightmare fuel, he could also fling corpses at people, corrupt areas of the stage granted Pyramid Head certain buffs if he stays in the area, and various other ways of asserting his dominance in the game. From Castlevania Symphony of the Night on the PlayStation 1, we have Alucard. He's a vampire who's just as deadly at close range as he is light-footed. He's got a sword and shield for close range engagements, throwable axes, and various spells he can unleash like his Hellfire, Tetra Spirit, and Soul Steel attacks. He's also got a bunch of tricks and techniques for getting around quickly. I mean, like I said earlier, he's a vampire, so he's already pretty dang quick. He can teleport and can even turn into a wolf for different attacks or even a bat for flying. All this would make Alucard one of the quicker characters who has tons of options for closing the gap on his opponents. The next spot is going to the fan favorite character 2B from Nier Automata. This close range android fighter can use various melee weapons which she can swap on the fly. She can deflect and parry melee and range attacks, and if she's got to duke it out in mid to long range, she can even use her pod companion, which can shoot lasers, rockets, and even a machine gun. The pod can even help 2B with mobility, letting her jump higher and glide certain distances. Oh, and one more detail. The girl's got a self-destruct feature which has to be in her move list. I mean, it would be a very high risk move since the self-destruct doesn't technically destroy 2B, but rather brings her health to near zero. But if used correctly, 2B can bring a very early end to whomever she fights against. I can see a lot of players using it to troll others in multiplayer, but it's one of 2B's signature moves, so she's gotta use it. One of the lesser known third-party characters on this list, let's add in Juan from Guacamelee. He's a fast combo heavy luchador with some crazy good throw potential. I'm talking various seismic tosses, suplexes, elbow drops, pile drivers, and other luchador focused wrestling moves. He's even got the power to turn into a chicken whenever he wants. And while you might think this will put him at a severe disadvantage, you'd be surprised that he can throw down just as well as a chicken as he can a human. So this transformation could make Juan much harder to hit with certain attacks, but it greatly reduces his health pool. Yeah, he can kick some butt as a chicken, but he's still a chicken, you know? He even made an appearance in the lesser known Smash clone Brawlout, so why not include him in All-Stars as well? Alright, y'all been waiting for me to talk about this next spot. Let's bring in Doom Guy. Of all the gun-focused characters on the list thus far, Doom Guy no doubt would be the biggest heavy hitter of the bunch. He's got his Praetor suit which can allow him to dash out of the way of attacks or to get in close. His suit's also fitted with explosive and ice grenades for crowd control, along with his flame belch ability for a quick burst of ranged damage. And that's not even touching up on the crazy weapons he could use, like his super shotgun which can fire a meat hook to help him get in close or to move around the area. He's also got his heavy cannon, combat shotgun, his chain gun, his plasma rifle, and for melee range he can use his chainsaw, his wrist-mounted Doom Blade, or his signature Crucible. For Doom Guy's ultimate attacks, one of them no doubt has to be where he uses the BFG 9000, or another where he spray and prays the area with the mobile turret feature on his chain gun. Another idea could be where Doom Guy takes control of the Revenant from that Doom Eternal mission and you fly a Revenant around the stage, raining lock-on missiles and barrages from the sky. Jesus Christ, we're past 100 characters. Okay, there's just 5 more entries on this list, and they're all big names. I'm going to turn my attention to Rockstar Games. The titles made by the studio, especially the ones from the PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3 generation, were some of the best games the consoles had to offer. So it would be a big deal if a Rockstar rep would come to the sequel. Of all the characters throughout the history of the studio, the best rep no doubt would be Carl Johnson from Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Now, before you guys tell me off in the comments section, yes, I'm well aware CJ will likely never make a comeback in any video game ever due to a falling out between Rockstar and the actor who plays as CJ. But just in case things between the two are patched up or whatever, I'm going to talk about what Carl Johnson would be like as a fighter in PlayStation All-Stars, okay? Now, CJ would likely be a mixed-range fighter who can use weapons that can cover various ranges, like with his brass knuckles, baseball bat, his dual-wielding SMGs, assault rifles, shotguns, and even his rocket launcher. He can control an RC helicopter to drop bombs on people, or call in a car full of his own fellow gang members to do a drive-by on the stage. But the thing that would make CJ different from the other gun wielders on this list would be his cheat codes. Yup, cheat codes. In GTA San Andreas, you can activate several cheats that can give CJ various abilities, equipment, and vehicles. But like in GTA 4, CJ should use a cell phone for this feature since randomly turning, punching, and jumping to get this stuff would just look weird. Some of the cheats you could use would be summoning a jetpack to give CJ a big mobility boost, summoning bodyguards, a super punch ability, lowering gravity for bigger jumps, or spawning tanks, hydras, hunters, and other military vehicles to use. And when it comes to special skins, CJ could potentially have more special skins than the rest of the whole roster. I mean, he could have a special skin for every single one of the main protagonists throughout the GTA multiverse. Or he could keep his skins more tailored to his world and have a special skin for Big Smoke, Ryder, and Sweet. From the PlayStation 1 era, I'm adding in the famous Lara Croft from the Tomb Raider series. Now before I go any further, I should address that there are 2 different Lara Crofts from different timelines, but for All-Stars, I think it would be best if they went with a pre-2013 version. I'm not against the younger Lara, it's just the Tomb Raider games from the PlayStation 1 and PS2 generations were the titles that put Lara in the spotlight, so it makes sense to stick to her original look and weapons. Speaking of which, Lara's moveset would feature her dual pistols and SMGs, her harpoon gun, shotgun, grenades, and her signature grapple hook, which she can use to swing around the stage and kick the snot out of anyone that she swings into. She's also a damn good martial artist and acrobat, able to flip and roll out of the way of danger, so she should be more than capable of holding her own in close to medium range. And being an adventurer type, she can maybe utilize tomb-style traps in her moveset, like rope swinging over her foes with spikes popping off right beneath her. Honestly, thinking about it now, Lara's moveset would be like a combination of Nathan Drake and Jill Valentine's, but with her own unique style. The next spot is going to Scorpion from Mortal Kombat. Seeing as how Mortal Kombat has a thing going on right now with Mortal Kombat fighters entering new worlds and timelines, most notably the DC universe, it would make sense for another Realm rep to be in a massive crossover title like All-Stars. And of all the characters under NetherRealm's belt right now, you know we gotta go with the literal face of the studio, Scorpion. Aside from his signature moves like his leg takedowns, uppercuts, and his backflip kicks, he could also use his various melee weapons like his katanas and axes. His kit would also utilize his supernatural abilities like conjuring fire, teleporting, summoning spirits of the damned to assist him, or even taking people to the Netherrealm. Oh, and you know the guy's gotta use his signature kunai spear for keeping his fights at close range. I'm sure a few of you watching are thinking that Scorpion should use his fatalities in PlayStation All-Stars. Well, to those few, I'm gonna crush your hopes now, cause that would be a terrible idea. Aside from the fact that the game's gotta stay T-rated, no one in their right mind wants to see a character like Parappa the Rapper get his head ripped off. And not just Parappa, like any character that's from a series meant for kids like Croc, Sackboy, or Sora. Allowing Scorpion to execute fatalities on those characters would cause a massive controversy in the gaming world, potentially resulting in other studios not wanting their guest characters in the game anymore and finding some legal way of getting them pulled from the roster. I wouldn't even risk him having his fatal blows or his X-rays. If Scorpion needs a finisher, his best bet would be to use his animalities, babalities, or better yet, his friendships. I mean, an original friendship idea of mine that would be great for Scorpion could be where he raises a Mortal Kombat arcade cabinet from a pool of lava, pulls out a quarter, puts it in the cabinet, and invites his opponent to a game of classic Mortal Kombat, and they start playing with the friendship logo.
Scorpion wins. Friendship. Friendship again?
The final fighting game character on this list has to go to Scorpion's arcade rival, Ryu from Street Fighter. Probably the most famous fighting game character in the world, and one who's no stranger to taking on new challengers from different worlds. I mean, he's fought against Marvel superheroes, video game characters from Capcom, SNK, the Tekken universe, and Nintendo, along with a small handful of anime characters. So why not throw him in the ring against the best PlayStation has to offer? I mean, he is called the Wandering Warrior for a reason. Like the earlier fighting game reps, Ryu's gotta have his signature fighting moves, like his Hadouken, Shoryuken, and his gravity-defying Hurricane Kick. And he could have an ultimate ability or two that's a powered-up version of these abilities, but why stop there? Ryu's got way more moves and techniques under his belt than mere kicks, fireballs, and uppercuts. He could also somehow use the Satsui no Hara with his kit, unlocking new moves and other abilities, most notably his Raging Demon, which if lands can take a massive chunk of health out of an opponent. He's also got the power of nothingness, which gives Ryu a massive stat boost across the board, and turns Ryu's Hadoukens into full-on Goku-style Kamehameha waves. There's also a couple of Street Fighter characters that could be special skins for Ryu, like Ken or Akuma. I mean, all three were trained in the Otsutsuken fighting style like Ryu was, so why not? Alright, so we're at the very final spot on this list. Wow, this list was way longer than I thought it would be. I mean, if any of you guys are still watching this, I thank you guys for sticking around this long, but now it's time to go over who I think should be the last great inclusion in the future PlayStation All-Stars sequel. And just a heads up, he's kind of a jump the shark kind of character. The final entry character on this list is... Spider-Man. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. What? You're picking Spider-Man? Why? He's not a PlayStation character. He's not even a video game character. Why is Spider-Man on this list? Well, here's the thing. I was a bit skeptical on whether or not to put Spider-Man on this list myself. I mean, yeah, he's not a video game character and shouldn't really have a place in a game like this. But believe it or not, Spider-Man is actually a decently requested character to be in the next PlayStation All-Stars. I'm being serious here. This isn't like people asking for Goku from Dragon Ball or Kevin Butler from the near decade-old PlayStation commercials. I didn't understand it at first, but I kinda understood it when I heard him out. I mean, it's mostly due to the fantastic PlayStation 4 Spider-Man game from Insomniac, and maybe the other Spider-Man games going all the way back to the PlayStation 1. Also, PlayStation seems to give the web slinger some extra love in most Marvel games. Now, if you played any of the Marvel vs. Capcom games or watched any of the MCU movies, you should know why Spider-Man would be a damn good fighter. Honestly, I'm not completely against Spider-Man being in the game, but if Spider-Man is given the green light to be in the next All-Stars, he needs to be a DLC character. Think about it. If PlayStation All-Stars 2 or whatever it's called is released, and the day one roster doesn't have highly requested entries like Joel and Ellie, Aloy, or Dart, and instead has freaking Spider-Man? Like, can you see what's wrong with that picture? Just please put him as a DLC character. That's all I'm asking. And you know what? With the Miles Morales game coming out soon, Spidey could get a special Miles Morales skin. I mean, really, it's just a standard Spider-Man suit with some of the colors swapped. And that does it. That's all 105 characters that could be in the next potential PlayStation All-Stars, and what each spot could bring to the table. Now, like I said earlier, I don't expect this whole group to be in the next game. I mean, if by some miracle it happens, then my god, the task of balancing the game alone would likely make the developers go insane. Now, it's pretty debatable whether or not we'll ever get another PlayStation All-Stars. As of this video's upload, it's been almost 8 years since we've heard anything from this series, with very little leaks, rumors, or anything of the sort. But if they ever decide to take another whack at this underdog of a title, just remember there are dozens of characters under Sony's disposal. Whether or not these characters could rival the roster from Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, well, that's up to you to decide. Let's just hope we get to see this game someday return. But until we hear from this series once more, I again thank you guys for sticking around for as long as you did. And if you want to see more future content on this channel, please leave a like and subscribe to this video. And until next time, peace.